This is Sharon Vornholt with the Louisville Gals Real Estate Blog, here today with my friend Bill Walston of BillOnBusiness.net, and we are going to talk about master lease options. This is a great strategy for real estate investors, but it's one that I think a lot of investors, especially new investors, aren't really familiar with. So we're going to get Bill to clear up everything about doing master lease options today. Thanks for coming on today, Bill.
You're welcome, Sharon. How are you doing?
I'm good. Let's start. I think most people know you, but let's start off by having you tell everybody a little bit about yourself, just in case we've got some new folks on here.
Sure thing. I kind of like to refer to myself as a reformed CPA. My background is in accounting and finance, and I have a graduate degree in tax law. So I spent a lot of years in an accounting practice. That's how I actually first got started, and kind of gravitated towards real estate investors. Those were my favorite clients, and it didn't take too long to find out that the profits were on the other side of the desk. So I left that practice, started real estate investing, and since then I've been able to kind of combine the two. I don't actually do the tax work anymore, but I do a lot of tax strategies, and most of those tax strategies involve real estate investors. I'm also an author, a coach, but I think more importantly, especially for what we're going to be talking about today, is I'm a real estate investor, as are you. And I think that's really important when we're talking about some of these strategies. These master lease option strategies are the same strategies that I use every day in my own business. It's the same strategies that has allowed me to close over 51 master lease option deals in the last, just shy of 4 years. So
that's an awesome number of deals, and I think that's a big takeaway for people. This isn't some theory that you're going to be talking about today. These are actual strategies that you use all the time in your business. And
exactly.
So I'm anxious to dive in. So what exactly is master lease option for those folks that might not know?
Okay, by a strict definition, a master lease is just a primary lease that controls all the subsequent leases. So basically it's a lease between an owner and a primary tenant, and then that tenant is direct with the owner of the property, and then there are a lot of leases, subleases underneath that. So it's a lease that actually allows you to sublease property. And when we talk about a master lease, I know a lot of people are familiar with lease option deals with single family residences. And if you do what is called a sandwich lease option, you really have a master lease with that particular property too. It's just that we usually don't use that terminology for it. Usually we reserve master lease for commercial properties.
Okay. So you could use these, we're going to talk about this a little bit later on, but for different types of properties. So what made you decide to go into master lease options?
I think it was the commercial bug. Just like everybody else, I've been investing for almost 3 decades, and I started with subject to deals, single family homes, a lot of lease option stuff. I hate banks. I think you know that from working with me. And honestly, that was another reason that I went to master lease options with commercial. I don't have to deal with the banks. But the major reason is, like with anyone else, I wanted to do commercial deals, but I didn't have the financing just like anybody else does. You run up against that obstacle, that financing obstacle, or that's how I think most people, that's the first obstacle they run up to. And with master lease options, you don't have to worry about the financing because you're not going to go with to banks. You're going to be dealing directly with the sellers.
So let me ask you this. Do you typically have to make a down payment on a master lease option deal?
I don't. No. And it depends on what you negotiate with the seller. I did make a mistake on one of my 51 deals, and I put down $500. But most of the time, I can do it without any type of large upfront payment. And again, it depends on, I think, the seller that you're working with. You know, if you were talking to someone with very large deals and a large number of units, then they may want to have some type of down payment or some type of large option fee. But I deal mostly with mom and pop investors. My niche is like between 10, I say it's between 5 and 50 units, but my average is like between 10 and 15 units. And so most of the time when I'm negotiating with them, I don't end up having to put down any type of deposit.
So you primarily invest in apartment buildings of 5 to 15 units, and that's where your niche is. Okay.
Yep.
So
yep.
I know this strategy isn't just for apartment buildings, though. So what types of properties would master lease options work well for?
Oh gosh, you can do a master lease option on just about any type of property. Retail, malls, strip malls, shopping, those type of shopping centers, office complex, mixed-use buildings where you have residential on the top and the bottom floor is like a restaurant or some type of shopping. The multifamily, like we talked about. Marinas. I have a friend in Florida that is her niche. Okay, she's doing marinas with master lease option on marinas, and she's doing a master lease on the entire marina as well as the restaurant. And then she's hired somebody to come in and run the restaurant area there. So it's working on that. Mobile home parks, self-storage, senior living, just about anything that you can rent, you can do a master lease option on.
Okay, that just opens up a whole world of possibility for people. Because,
oh, yeah.
I mean, when I think about master lease options, I typically think about apartment buildings. I never really gave a thought to something like a marina or even a self-storage. But I guess if you find a seller that wants out and they can't find a buyer with cash, then they would be a good candidate possibly for a master lease option.
Absolutely would.
Okay, so how do you find your properties? Can you give folks a couple of ways they might look for properties for master lease options?
Sure. They're both online and offline ways that you can use to find properties. For instance, online you have LoopNet, and I know that LoopNet, everybody says LoopNet is where a good deal goes to die. But that's not really true for master lease option because we want deals that haven't been able to sell. We want motivated sellers. So for us, that's a good place to start looking for deals. So you can find stuff on LoopNet. There's a site called CityFeet. PropBot is a good site. CoStar is a good site. So there are a lot of commercial sites that are available. Basically, what you want to do is just find good motivated sellers. Offline, you can look for expired listings. So if you have a broker, a commercial broker who can send you expired listings because they're expireds with commercial properties, just like they're expireds with residential property. Apartment Owners Association is a good place to start networking. So that's a good place. Property managers, also a good place, and bird dogs. I love bird dogs, and you can use bird dogs for commercial deals just as you can use bird dogs for residential deals. So a lot of various ways. And then my favorite offline, of course, is direct mail. So you're a big fan of direct mail, just as I'm a big fan of direct mail, and you can use direct mail for property deals as well.
Now, don't I remember hearing you say that you use Craigslist? You find a lot of deals on Craigslist too.
I do. I use Search Tempest, which is a Craigslist aggregator. So basically what Search Tempest does is it will let you search all of the Craigslist listings in a particular area. So I go to searchtempest.com and put in my search criteria, but it searches Craigslist. And yes, I do. I use Craigslist. Yeah. And then I will either contact the seller through either email or text message. And get them to give me a call back.
So there you've given folks some really quite a few free ways they can find properties. Certainly we know direct mail works, but if you're just getting started and you really don't have the money for direct mail, that's just a wealth of tools that he just gave you that are free. I think they're all, for the most part, they're free, aren't they? In fact, almost all the ones. Now, LoopNet does have a paid membership. I don't use it. I use the free membership. Okay. And there are a few that I didn't mention. I think PropBot has a pro
program as well. But I think every single one of the online areas that I mentioned have free sources.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, and I'll get a list from Bill, and we can maybe put a list of the sites for folks into the blog post so they can check them out too. So,
Sure thing.
Let's say you found your lead now, and you want to go and start a conversation with this seller. I'm pretty sure you don't just go in and say, hey, Mr. Seller, you're the guy who's looking for cash, and I don't want to give you any. Would you do a master lease option? So
Yeah.
Tell me how, for people, so that they understand this process of how you go from talking to a seller who thinks he's going to get cash, and you somehow get them to not get any cash and do a master lease option.
Yeah, you're exactly right about that. I don't know of anybody who wakes up and says, "Oh, I'm going to master lease option my property today," right? Yeah, what they want to do is sell it. And so I teach all of my students that you need to approach the seller as a buyer. Okay. And that's how you begin every negotiation. I actually do, everybody says you start your negotiations with a letter of intent with commercial property, and you do. And my first letter of intent nearly always is a letter of intent that lets out the term or states out the terms and conditions in which I would buy the property, and I start negotiating that way. And a lot of times you're going to find that what you're willing to offer based on the numbers that the seller gives you, is not going to be what he's asking for. Okay, so that allows you to move over into the transition and talk about master lease option, because I approach it some way by saying, okay, Mr. Seller, based on the numbers you gave me, the most I can offer you for the property is X. Based on our conversations, that's just not going to work for you, and I understand that. However, if we can structure the deal a little differently, then I can probably come closer to your asking price. Is that something we should talk about?
Mm-hmm. And
okay. So I've already told him we're going to structure the deal differently, and, if he says no, then I know he's not open to anything creative, and I say, well, good luck to you in selling your overpriced building, and when you don't sell it, get back to me. But if he does say yes, then I know he's open to some more negotiation, and then I move into talking about a master lease option deal.
Okay. Now, these folks have to know that there are not that many great big cash buyers with all the financing issues going on. Do you think that the fact that they can't get loans as easily, folks can't get financed as easily, has made master lease options a better option for people?
Oh, I think so. I think that it's better for both commercial deals as well as single family deals. I think the tightening of the credit has made people a little more amenable to a creative situation. So I think they're willing to say, okay, getting out of what I'm in right now, whatever's motivating them to sell, is better than staying in it and getting the cash, because they're not always going to be able to. A lot of these deals are not going to be financed at what the seller wants to sell the property for. If they're willing to take a deep discount, then yes, they could probably get a cash buyer to come in. Okay, but for someone like me, it works really well because I'm not going to offer cash right now. Okay, but I do offer them a solution to their problem.
Okay. So then if you make an offer, like a low cash offer, then you're going to just go ahead and straight out buy the property, but they usually want their bigger and more inflated price. Is that
yeah.
what you're saying?
Yep, that's what I'm saying, and that's how I approach most of my deals, and I do approach all of them as a buyer, and sometimes, believe it or not, you'll make your deal or you'll make your offer what you think is lowball, and they're never going to accept it, so you're all ready to talk about a master lease option deal, and lo and behold, they'll sign the LOI and send it back to you, and you go, oh crap, now I've got to decide how I'm going to buy this thing, right?
Now I've got to find some money to actually buy it. Yeah. I guess that's kind of a good problem to have sometimes. So.
It is a very good problem to have sometimes, but it's surprising. Okay, I've had that happen to a few of my clients, and they say, now what am I going to do? So, okay, well, we're going to buy instead. Yeah, right. That's when you do your due diligence, right?
So let's talk about that a little bit. Let's talk about analyzing properties, because people know with single family homes it's pretty straightforward. You look at comps, you look at your criteria, but we'll just say apartment buildings. Let's use that for an example. That's a whole different ballgame, the way they're valued, the way you look at what they're worth. So let's talk about analyzing deals a little bit.
Okay. For me, a deal is all about the numbers, right? Which works out pretty well because I'm a numbers guy. But the holy grail of commercial is net operating income. That is going to depend in large respects what the property is going to be worth. And, everybody says the value of property is in its cash flow. All right. So it's in its cash flow. It's in its net operating income. And that's how a lot of properties are valued, with the net operating income and the cap rate. And I know most people who are familiar with commercial at all have heard of both those terms. So they know a little bit about how the two relate. I know there are other ways. Some use a gross rent multiplier, but for me, it boils back down to analyzing the net operating income. So I always up front get the numbers, and then you have to go through and take a look at those. You've got to be able to review those and say, yes, this seems reasonable, this doesn't seem reasonable. A little bit about knowing what the average expenses are going to be so that you know that the seller's not pulling your leg when he says he has a 15% expense ratio, right? But at large respect, it starts with the numbers. And if the numbers work, then I'm going to go a little further, make my offer based on those numbers. And with commercial, it's a little different in that your initial offer may not be your final offer. Okay, because we do it a little differently than residential. We don't always, in residential, you run the comps, you make sure that your offer is going to be the best offer, and that's what you go with, right? In commercial, we do our best offer. Right? What we think is going to be our best offer. But after we do our letter of intent and have an offer in principle, that's when the work really starts and we do our due diligence. And then based on the due diligence, we may find something that will cause us to go back and renegotiate that offer.
Okay. So do you, I know there's a lot of talk about completely virtual investing. Do you go and physically look at the properties, or do you have someone to look at the properties?
Before I do a letter of intent, or before I finish the deal?
During your due diligence, after you think you've got a deal.
Okay, after I think I've got a deal, yes, I'm going to want somebody to either go in and take a look and send me pictures, or I'm going to go down there and take a look myself. Okay. However, when I get ready to make my initial offer, a lot of times I'll make that offer and send out that letter of intent before I've even set foot on the property or had anybody take a look at the property, because it's based on numbers.
Okay. So I guess one thing just popped in my mind. They can say, well, everything was renovated 10 years ago, and what happens if, you do your numbers? I guess that's when you figure this out when you get there, and it actually hasn't had anything done to it in 30 years. You're going to say, right. Wait a minute, my numbers are no longer my numbers.
Right. And what's kind of interesting is the numbers are the numbers. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so when you're analyzing the revenues and you're analyzing the expenses, that doesn't always take into consideration whether renovations have been made, whether they've not been made. That's still the cash flow. Now, there are some types of what we call deferred maintenance that may affect whether the properties can stay rented, how long they can stay rented, that type of thing. So it might affect those. Okay. But it doesn't always affect the numbers itself. So when I'm looking at a deal, one of the hardest things that I had to get used to, and some of the things that my clients have to get used to, is we're not going to live there. Right. So it might not be the most elegant looking property. In fact, we don't look for A properties, right? We look for what we call B and C properties. And so most of it depends on the numbers. You want to make sure that it's going to cash flow.
Okay. So from an investor's point of view, let's think about the new investor. Is there, after you get your net operating expense and all of that, is there a per door amount that's a good amount? Like if you're talking about single family homes, I know people that say, I don't want a house that won't cash flow at least $200 after all expenses.
$200.
What is it?
Right.
So is that the same? Is it $100 a door? Or what is it?
Yeah, I think that's going to be a very personal decision, what you need to look at, because remember with a master lease option, we're doing it a little bit differently than if we were making the commitment to buy and we're stuck with the property. Yeah, one of the things I like about master lease options, we have the old saying, maybe it's not an old saying, that you could try it before you buy it, basically. So you have the ability to go in there and check to see what those numbers are, check to see how the property stays rented, all kinds of things before you ever commit to finally buying the property, right? So all you need to do during the term of your master lease is to make sure that the property cash flows and you don't go in the hole every month paying that guaranteed net operating income to the seller. Okay, so when I'm analyzing a deal, I'll take a look at it and say, okay, I want to be able to do value plays, and by value plays, that's something that will increase revenues, decrease expenses so that the net operating income goes up. Okay, I want to be able to do enough value plays that this property is going to be cash flowing me $50 per door within the first 30 to 60 days. Because if it's cash flowing me $50 per door, and that's after I've paid the guaranteed net operating income to the seller that I've promised him every month, then I'm okay. And I'm not going in the hole.
Okay. So that would be a year minimum then, like 50.
That's my personal minimum. And that's within the first 30 to 60 days before I've even had a chance to get in there and really do what I want to do and do what value plays I want to do.
Okay. So when you're going, you're valuing your property in that manner, you're talking about value plays. If a property is at a certain level where the interior is declining, let's say it needs some carpet, needs some countertops or whatever, in order to maintain or to maybe even attract a little bit better renter, is there a level of repairs or upgrades or renovation that you're willing to do, or do you pretty much want it done the day you buy it? Want it to be
okay. Yeah. When I go in, I will be willing to do some cosmetic stuff as long as my cash flow will justify it, because Bill ain't coming out of pocket for none of these expenses. Okay. So I will not commit to doing anything structural, and basically what's considered to be a capital improvement, I won't do anything with. Yeah, like if the roof has to be repaired, or if a furnace has to be replaced, or if an apartment needs all appliances replaced. That's still the responsibility of the owner of the property. And that's spelled out very carefully when we go into contract. I just tell him, say, hey, this is stuff that you would have to do if you were going to sell it anyway, either in a repair allowance or before the sale is done. So if it comes up during the term of the lease, then you're going to have to take care of that. Okay. I will do the other ordinary repairs and maintenance, painting, that has to be done in between tenants. That's part of the operating expenses, which I am responsible for. And that's figured into the operating expenses when I'm analyzing my deal. Roof repair, like shingles or something like that, I will probably do. I will do some cosmetic fix-up, like, paint the mailboxes, put new signs up, things like that make the property a little more attractive, that will keep tenants there or maybe bring in new tenants. I will do those, but I don't do anything structural. Okay,
so you're doing just small things, and in your agreement, it's written in there that, see, that was a question that came to mind. It's my home inspector background coming out. What if the furnaces go out? What if you have all the furnaces go out? So that's the responsibility of the owner, and then you take care of the smaller types of things.
Right. Anything that is considered, like for those who are familiar with anything that's considered an operating expense, okay, is my responsibility when I take over the property, because I take over the property management as well. Okay, but anything that is considered a capital expenditure, which usually has a life of over over a year, that type of thing for tax purposes, the seller is still responsible for that. Yes.
Okay. So we've kind of gone through, what a master lease option is, how you find the properties, a little bit about, negotiation and analyzing. So what is the typical term of a lease option where you get to try it before you buy it, and then you got to make a decision?
Yeah, I like to go with 5 years. Mm-hmm. And the reason for that is one of the biggest mistakes that I see people making when they try to do something like this is thinking they're going to be able to go in and turn around the building in 1 or 2 years. Not going to be able to do it. Okay. You really need more time than that. I have one deal that I went 3 years on, and that was because the property was already in good condition, and it just worked out well. Three-year term was really good. But most of my master lease option deals are 5 years or less.
Okay, so
5 years or more. I'm sorry, 5 years or more.
Do you ever get in the situation where for whatever reason you're not ready to cash out, but maybe you're not ready to throw in the towel on the property, and you go back to the seller and say, would you extend it? Does that ever happen?
I will tell you it hasn't yet, because remember I just started these just shy of 4 years ago, so most of mine I haven't even had to run into it yet. I have anticipated that, yes. And so there are clauses built into the contract where you can negotiate an extension, right? I even had a guy one time who said, I don't want to give 5 years. No, 5 years won't work. And I said, okay. I said, what about a 3-year term with 2 1-year extensions? Will that work? Oh, yeah, that's fine. Okay, so go figure. I got my 5 years that way. So, yeah, you can negotiate a lot of those things with the sellers. It's just whatever motivates them. And so, yeah, I think there may be some that I might go back and do that with.
Do you have an idea, since you're just coming up on that 5-year term, if you were to venture a guess, what would you say you'll exercise most of the options, or 50%? Do you have any idea how that's going to play out in the next couple of days?
Right now, based on the numbers, all of my properties are running really, really well. Okay. And I only have one that I know that I'm not going to do anything on. I'm not going to exercise my option, just going to turn the sucker back over. And it's not because it's not cash flowing, because it is. Okay. It's just in an area that I don't want to be in. I went into the deal because the owner was a friend of mine, wanted to get rid of the property, and I have no desire to own a property in Anderson, South Carolina. So that's one that I'm going to get rid of. And probably what I'll do is I'll just flip it to another investor, because it's still a good deal.
If there's somebody listening here that wants a property in Anderson, South Carolina.
Anderson, South Carolina, hit me up.
Hit Bill
in just about.
Yeah, he may have one for you, and he can probably show you how to redo this whole master lease option. Well, Bill, I think we've pretty well covered the scope of the master lease options. Do you have any advice for people that want to work in this strategy? You have any special words of wisdom to give them?
With master lease options, absolutely. Go ahead and get started. Yeah. I think the biggest fear that most people have is the numbers. Okay. And then going into commercial property, they have the fear of numbers, making a mistake, not having the cash to be able to do the deal, right? Those are the usual objections or obstacles that people have. Well, you can do a master lease option with very little risk. Okay. You've just got to make sure that your contract is structured correctly. Very little cash exposure. And then when you get ready to exercise your option, there are a lot of ways or exit strategies that you can use that don't even involve going to the banks to get money. So I would say get started, okay? And you're going to probably need someone like I did who knows what they're doing and can help you out and answer the questions.
Yeah, and I think I want to point that out to everybody, that Bill does a lot of coaching for folks that want to learn how to do master lease options and all other sorts of real estate strategies. So you can hit him up over at billonbusiness.net. And I know that he has a freebie for you, a free audio download. Do you want to tell folks about that, Bill?
Sure. The audio download is actually on residential lease options because I started with those, and I think that's really still a very good strategy, especially now with the way financing and things like that is going. So it's an audio called Talking Lease Options, and they can get it at billonbusiness.net/flipping. That's FLIPPING, billonbusiness.net flipping. And it's just an audio where a friend and I were talking, much like Sharon, you and I are, about how to do lease options on single family residences.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, and I'll put that link in the blog posts and the other resources that Bill talked about. I'll get him to shoot me over a list of those so that I think the advice he gave you was great. Just take the move, make a move and get started, because you'll look up 12 months, 18 months, or 2-3 years down the road, and you'll still be in the same spot you're in today. And that's where you don't want to be. You want to you want to do something. Well, thanks again, Bill, for coming on. And I'm sure this is a topic that we'll go back over down the road. But for today,
I'm sure we will.
This is Sharon Vornholt with the Louisville Gals Real Estate Blog, and Bill Walston with billonbusiness.net. And we'll be back soon with another episode. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Sharon.